Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the News Behind the News with Ralph Cantava on Mix 94.7 FM. And today I am glad to have the multi-potentialite that I have here with me. She's already laughing. I say multi-potentialite because, and I think, I remember when I interviewed Tamara Leonard and I basically said, this is someone with a lot of commas behind her name. Mm-hmm. And so I have here with me a linguist, author, educator, former minister, and so many more. Mm-hmm. And so good afternoon to you, Dr. Rhoda Arrindell, and thank you so much for coming on the program.
Good afternoon to you, Ralph, and to your listeners and viewers. But you know what? I'm excited about that word you just used there. I think I can borrow that.
That's okay. My wife bestowed it upon me, so I was like,
I love it. That's one to add to my arsenal.
Indeed. So there's, of course, a lot that we can talk about. I think if me and you sit down and have a conversation, unfiltered and straight through that would be at least maybe 3 to 4 hours.
With some food, right?
Of course. And Johnny Cakes sponsored by us, surely.
Some Johnny Cakes for sure.
A big, fried, pot baked, yes. You name it. But, there's some key topics at least that I think we can start off with, and I'll for sure, have you back on the program. One of them being, of course, last week, you made a presentation in Parliament about the national anthem, which we do not have, although we have the St. Martin song.
We have many St. Martin songs.
Yes, correct. And that, had its own discussion, but also, as far as a matter of decolonization and many more things, So, but to start off with, one, I think you're widely known on the island. So I won't start with asking the question I usually ask others. And first question,
what is that?
Which is usually tell me about yourself. But I have a little twist this time, and my question for you is tell me something about yourself that most people don't know, which you would now know, of course.
That most people don't know. Well, I'll tell you something that a very close friend of mine said she was shocked to find out, and this is somebody I'm close to, that I'm a very spiritual person. A lot of people don't know that because I don't do religion. So she said, and I was like, but I was always like this. Yeah. Okay. A lot of people don't know that, or a lot of people don't know, like I think they know now that I love gardening more than cooking or more than eating.
You love to garden?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that was a boom last year, especially during the lockdown.
That's been my life, my whole life.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right then. So add that to the list of commas as well. So one of the things I would like to start off with is really your book, actually. Language, Culture, Identity. I forgot what the subtitle was.
In St. Martin, yeah. Language, Culture, and Identity in St. Martin.
Okay, I thought it was more to it.
No.
All right. I found it was a very insightful book.
Thank you.
So can you tell us, why did you write that book, and can you share some of the content, that stood out to you in the process?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. The book actually started on a journey. My first degree was in linguistics, right? So I came back 89 and working on the St. Martin language, right? Because you grew up with it, you love it, you are a linguist, you learn a lot about theory in school. So when you came back, it's a field that I'm passionate about, things that I saw in school, things that make sense now, that I have some theory to understand it better. And I was asked to do a presentation on Black History Month celebration. That's where the whole thing started. And what I said, because we were talking about Black history, Black pride, Black everything. And what I said was, one of the things about who we are is our language. And we should embrace that like everything else during Black history or any other time, right? And that was the presentation. The value of the St. Martin English, but not just in comedy or in caricature, in the school system and everywhere. Oh my goodness. You can imagine the backlash, the newspaper articles, the attacks. And I couldn't understand it. It didn't make sense in my head because I was like, who goes against promoting your stuff in your interests, right? But it's these false notions that we have about not just identity, but about prestige. What is prestigious and then where the power is. So I said, I need more to be able to answer this question. How do you get St. Martin people to value what is theirs and to recognize that there's nothing wrong with it? It has exactly the same potential as any other language anywhere in the world. A lot of us don't see that. They see it as, we were trained bad English, broke up English, substandard, non-standard, etc., improper, etc. But they don't understand that it have nothing to do with learning or have anything. So a lot of people didn't understand that. And I was like, how do I get this message across? So I started looking again, where do I get? And then I ended up at the University of Puerto Rico, and I did my doctorate now in linguistics. And I specialize in Caribbean languages, what they call Creole languages, one of the group of Creole languages, etc. So I really wanted to look at Caribbean languages and how we can empower Caribbean people in the classroom. And so that's where it came. But before that, I was talking about identity a lot, so the Black History Month celebration. So when I wrote my dissertation proposal, one of my advisors said to me, that's a heavy chunk. Why don't you do them separately? Do language separate, do culture separate, or do identity. These are 3 different theses that you could do. And I was like, you don't understand. This is for St. Martin. This is just a doctorate proposal just to come and get a doctorate degree. To me, the 3 things are interlinked. And I want to write about it using St. Martin as my base. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to defend the thesis, the dissertation, and at the end of it, I came back home. Now I'm more prepared, right? And one day in a conversation with Lasana, Lasana Sekou, how he is, right? And he said, when are you doing this book? When is this book? And I was like, And he was like, you know what? Can I see it? And I sent it to him, and then
he ran with it.
Lasana was like, well, you need to do this, and we should be publishing this, and this needs to be out there. So I had to rewrite now the dissertation in a format that would lend itself to the book. Mm-hmm. And that's language, culture, and identity. Great,
yeah. And I really recommend people to go and get a copy of your book, because it's a great foundation that can be, people can build off of, especially for other books. And I love the fact now that there's such a growing interest in St. Martin people to write as well, whether young authors or more mature people. Yeah. So that's really a great thing.
And the question about what stood out for me, because when I got there, we were in this conversation, again, Creole language. This is why it's important, I say this to my students, that Caribbean students study linguistics. This is really important, because in linguistics, there are all these theory about our languages, especially languages of the African diaspora. And they're always coming with a Eurocentric lens and a Eurocentric perspective of language that, to me, is inadequate to encompass language, human language, throughout the world. So a lot of the theory and stuff that I learned about in my first degree, my undergraduate degree, didn't make sense to my gut, right? So by the time you get to the doctorate and you're dealing with Caribbean varieties and you're at a university in the Caribbean, with professors from everywhere in the world, but also heavy hitters like Mervyn Allain from University of the West Indies fame, and who had written a groundbreaking book called Comparative Afro-American, showing the relationship between West African languages and Caribbean languages and helping us to understand what it is we are doing in a classroom. And he was my mentor, and he was my director for my dissertation. So when I got there, I'm going to meet the great Mervyn Allain. And I sat in my first meetings with him, and I said, well, they say the St. Martin language is a Creole language, and, and I'm here to, and he looks at me like, like, child, stop, don't give it a name. Do the research first, and let the research tell you how to label it. So going in the theoretical conversation, this is a Creole language, and, that whole story that I was trained in undergraduate study. Whoa, hold on a minute here. What are the features of a Creole language? What makes it a Creole language, et cetera, et cetera? And where does St. Martin fit in that, in that bucket? Mm-hmm. We found 14 features that not all Creole languages have, but are supposedly Creole features. And if there are 14, then you have the spectrum. They have this whole spectrum in linguistics that you have the basilect on one side and then the so-called mesolect. And these are just fancy words meaning bad English according to our interpretation, and proper English on the other end of the extreme, right? And so Caribbean varieties tend to get placed on this spectrum based on somebody's, of these features. Mm-hmm. Well, St. Martin was dead smack in the middle. 7 features, right? And But what it showed was that these 7 features were more closely related to West African languages. Had nothing to do with English. They ain't got no relationship to do with English. The features have nothing to do with whether it's a bad version of English. This is a very typical West African feature. And in particular, yeah? Go ahead.
I need an example.
Yeah, I want to give you an example.
Good.
Yeah, because you speak Haitian Creole, right?
Yes, très bien.
You know how you say in St. Martin, I does eat?
Yeah.
You see that does there?
Yeah.
That's what we call a particle that shows habituality in West African languages. Say it in Haitian Creole.
I does eat?
Uh-huh.
Well, I eat?
No, but you see how you translate St. Martin into standard.
No.
Yeah, but go ahead. I eat.
Because if I say it in Creole, it's going to be different.
I want to hear it. I want to hear what you say.
If you say, I does eat, moi qu'à manger?
Yes, exactly what it is. Moi qu'à manger.
Yeah.
Mita come. You say ka, ta, does, exact same particle.
Gotcha.
Exact same particle. So you see it throughout our language, the things that we do with our speaking, we're using the West African syntax, the sentence structure, but using the vocabulary of either English or French or Portuguese, etc. So we keep what we know, what we have, and to survive, you cover it with the vocabulary. So now you look like the stupid person or the buffoon or the non-intellectual, the so-called Creole speaker because you can't really manage standard English. But it ain't that. You're saying, I know 2 languages. I'm going to use yours to survive in this space. But over here, my people can understand me because they know where I'm coming from.
And that is a genius of who we are, what we come from.
Yes.
You know? Yeah. Because when you just simply acknowledge the fact that, hey, we are still here.
Exactly.
You know,
right?
considering the depth of slavery and colonialism, you realize, man.
Yeah, like this tree wasn't supposed to survive.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, tree, that's like what Toussaint said when he was captured by the French in chopping down this tree. Paraphrase, chopping down this tree, you think that you have a victory, but the roots are deep and it will spring up again.
The tree of life.
Yeah.
The tree of life.
So I'm glad you mentioned that because, one of the questions I have for you was to simplify, really, because, oftentimes people will say, well, semantic English is not proper, it's a dialect, it's a twang, and I want you to clarify, is it simply a language? What is the label we give our semantic, or just say semantic English?
Right. But let's start with our understanding of what language is, right?
Okay.
Right, because that's the difference, right? In linguistics, right? In the field of linguistics and in education, a language is a vehicle to communicate, right? And all languages have rules, all. So what I wanted to do in my book was write the rules of the semantic English, right? So people can understand the rules, because all languages have rules. So if you understand that, and then you understand in linguistics, not how we use it in layman's term, a dialect would be a variety of a language. So the English language has many dialects, right? You have the Scottish, you have the Wales, you have the Welsh, you have different, the Australian, New Zealand. Nobody says New Zealand is bad English. Nobody says Australian is bad English. Or the Irish. I have family members of mine who live in England. I have a hard time understanding them. But nobody says that their English, is bad. It's a different dialect. That's what the St. Martin English is.
Gotcha.
A different dialect with its own rules. And sometimes if you listen to Irish people and Scottish people, they sound closer to us than, for example, the Americans with certain words, right? Because their dialect has a lot of similarities to our dialect. And so what Dr. Alain did in Comparative Afro-American was looked at these different dialects, well, English, but he also studied Haitian Creole and some of the others, like the spirit language of Jamaica, different varieties where Africans settled in big numbers, and that you could see the similarities.
Interesting. Could you give me another example
of the
I think that, and side note, I think that's something great. I don't know if you maybe you should consider doing just a video of briefly explain that, because I love the example. I didn't when you say, because so when I translated, I was like, okay, let me translate I eat.
Because you want to be proper.
I now understand. I now understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Translate I does eat, which is what we say. I does eat.
In Creole. But in the English language, the so-called standard, there is no habitual marker. It marks it on the verb. That's European languages. So English would say he sleeps, and they would add the S to show habit. Well, in West African languages, the marker is a particle that comes after the subject.
Gotcha.
See, and that's a rule standard. And if you, for example, if you want to say past tense, now when it's in Latin English, in the standard, the American or the British, you would say he saw Desmond, right? So Martin, he had see. Had is used as a particle to mark past tense.
Yeah, and Creole then moite we.
Right.
Yeah.
See?
Moite
So you
we,
need
yeah.
a particle to
Gotcha.
say it's past. You don't mark the verb. But so that's what I did. So that's
Gotcha.
the whole idea.
Okay, appreciate it. Okay.
Elabai.
This is something I want
In
to
Papiamento.
practice myself now.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I think this is a really great way. It's very
It's
interesting.
mind-blowing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, and then that reminds me just of, I think it was Frederick Douglass,
Yeah.
who said, knowledge makes one impossible to be a slave.
Yeah. That's how I feel.
Yeah, because now, with that understanding, you can't necessarily revert, or even if you revert back, then you
You have the knowledge now. So
Correct.
what you going to do with it, right?
Correct.
And that's how I felt when I talked about the Black History Month celebration thing. I know what I know, right? And a lot of what I know is in my spirit. I know it. But oftentimes when you know something instinctively, you are forced to tame it down, hold it back, because of,
Because it
the
seems so
perception
radical.
outside.
Yes.
And so what I'm learning more and more about myself is that I need to trust that more. I need to trust that instinct more. I'm learning to embrace certain things. It doesn't seem apparent to everybody at this moment, but I know what I know. The question is, how do you communicate that outside so that other people can be able to share in that knowledge?
So last week you were in Parliament. Basically, you were invited to give a presentation on the discussion as far as it relates to our national song, our national anthem. Because we don't have an anthem as yet. I do know that when you were Minister of Education, I was still in school actually. I was still in high school. Yeah, when
really?
I remember our assembly and academy, and you were there and announced it. So that I hope I don't make you feel too.
You just grew up and had a whole marriage and the whole works in that, in that time, right?
Well, it's after I tell people, I was born yesterday, but I stayed up all night.
Darn right. You're one of those.
Yeah, indeed. Also, but that. Well, one, government fell.
No, they threw it down. It don't fall by itself.
That is
English language.
They threw down the government because that is what happened. Action, right? And of course, it wasn't picked up. But now, we've seen a discussion come about several times since. And just last week you were in Parliament. So can you share, tell us why do you feel that having our national anthem created is important? What does it mean for a nation? And exactly where do we go from here?
Well, that's a good question. If you were to ask me personally, this on a personal note, I would say, boy, when we become independent, we'll have that whole brand new national anthem to go with the new status, right? Because that's really usually how anthems come about, right? When nations find themselves in a new situation, or when they are born, literally when you're born, right? Or sometimes when you fought a war and you won the war, you say, I make my claim. And so from now on, we will sing. So usually that's how it happens. So getting in there in October 10th in the new status, we looked around, what are some of the things, because we're in a new situation. It's not a situation that I would pick for St. Martin, but it's still a new situation. So what are some of the things that didn't get done prior to 10-10-10, and how can we now fulfill those things that needed to get it? Because you're in a new status and you're moving forward. And the anthem was lacking, according to the Constitution. So that's how it started. So if it's lacking, because in order for something to become an anthem, it has usually 100%, 99.9%. I've not found a situation where it hasn't happened like this. It has to be officialized, right? Somebody says, this is now the national anthem. Recognized by the state, basically. Right, recognized by the state. Sometimes it comes out of practice. a song that's very familiar and the people like it's a patriotic song. But for it to be considered the national anthem, the state recognizes it. So in our staatsregeling, right, that they refer to as constitution, there's an article that's saying it needs to be ratified by Parliament.
Gotcha.
So I was like, okay, let's do that then. Let's get a song that we can bring to Parliament and say, Parliament, on behalf of the people of St. Martin, do your job. Make it official, right? What we were proposing was a competition. We did it in the Netherlands Antilles. I don't know if you were old enough. You were in school, probably elementary school then, in 97 when Zahira Hillerman. Yeah, you were just born 2 years old.
Yeah, because me and Akila
you and Akila same age, right? You were just 2 years old when Zahira Hillerman won the Antillean anthem. And technically speaking, up until October 10, 2010, that was our anthem.
Oh, yeah, because we were part, yeah.
That was our official anthem. Yeah. No, I didn't know it. I know she won the competition, etc. I'd heard the song a couple of times, but I didn't know the anthem. But now at Netherlands Antilles no longer exists.
Yes, I follow you.
It's dissolved. So now that it's dissolved, can we replace the Antillean anthem with a St. Martin anthem per the Constitution for St. Martin? So that was the conversation, right? And if Zahira had won a competition in Netherlands Antilles, we were like, why reinvent the wheel? Competition, why don't we do a competition at St. Martin and get people all involved and all excited about participating, because you're also building national pride, right? And whatever. We as government wouldn't decide. We would install a committee, and the committee would go about setting the criteria, the guidelines, etc. for the competition. And then, because, what do I know about writing a song? What should be in a song, So they would get together. We had identified 7 people, and we approached them, and we asked them if they'd like to serve on the committee. Even one person turned it down and say, I appreciate the honor, but I want to participate in the competition, so I don't want to be part of the committee. So, so that's where we were. We were busy having that conversation, and then on October 10th, 2011, I would announce the competition as minister. And so that would be something that we would do on the 1 anniversary of the 10-10-10 celebration. And then we would announce this whole thing. Somebody felt it necessary to share the planning with the media for whatever reasons. I don't know. Up to today, I don't care. And they had a ball, not just the media, because the media on itself, to me, sadly, like we don't have local journalists, not enough. So I'm glad that people like you coming back, right? But we don't have people who connected to St. Martin with a soul in the same way for St. Martin as people who think they find something nefarious that these politicians doing, so let's go after them. So that was one thing. The other thing, with the masses being ignorant about a lot of things, there's some people who used it to capitalize, to get their own 2 extra minutes in the spotlight. And I think that was a sad situation, because here we are 10 years later and still no anthem. So yeah, that was why. That's what we thought was going to happen, Within a year, you would have a competition, and maybe by 2012, you'd have this thing that the people were involved with, that they agreed to, and then as minister, your duty, you bring it to Parliament. You say, Parliament, the people of St. Martin has...
Gotcha.
Here it is.
Gotcha.
That was the plan.
Gotcha. Well, in light of, again, right now we have discussions of decolonization, but also there was a relaunch of the National Development Plan, which is now National Development Vision. But I think these are some of the elements that will remain in view, let's say, as we move forward. But we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to continue on that subject. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the News Behind the News on Mix 94.7 FM. This afternoon, I am joined with Dr. Rhoda Arrindell, linguist, author, former minister, and educator. And we have quite a bit to talk about. So we last discussed basically the process of the national anthem that St. Martin doesn't have as yet. But I'm glad that you basically gave an overview of why it came about and why was it a discussion that took place. But another issue of serious concern is always that of language of instruction.
My favorite topic.
But one in particular, looking at that and its correlation to our judicial system in particular. Because, for example, we remember having a discussion on air on Super Show, as it relates to the challenges in getting recruits for, let's say, for the police. Because one of the issues is that you have persons who may be interested, but they're not that strong or they don't have much of a command in the Dutch language, and so that limits the amount of let's say local nationals or residents to participate. So you kind of have to depend on a handful from here, maybe a few from other islands in the kingdom, but it's a serious matter of concern because you notice a distancing
Can I
I
don't want to interrupt you because I know we have time limit, but can I derail a conversation and say from the perspective of linguistics what you say don't make any sense? Not you personally. The argument holds no water. Remember we just talked about languages and linguistics, right? Go back to what you say about judiciary. If you understand the role of a judiciary, the justice system, the universal principles of justice, it says, number one, a people should be tried by their peers and usually in a language of their own. That's number one. So there's something wrong in St. Martin if the judiciary is not in the people's language, if the justice system is not in the people's language, because we're putting the cart before the horse. That's number one. But number two, we talk about the difference between language of instructions and language instruction. They're two very different things. And I think people keep conflating the two, sometimes intentionally, because the agenda is different, right? So I want to talk about that topic, but I also want to point out something. There was a study done. I wish I had it now so I could tell you the name of it, but you should go after it. It was done by a few lawyers that came to St. Martin a few years ago, study what was happening in the judicial system, and concluded they see no reason why the judiciary is in the Dutch language in St. Martin. These are done by lawyers in the Netherlands because it goes against every principle of justice internationally. And I guess they came down to look at the linguistic situation on St. Martin, and they concluded that. The reason I can tell you this, because when I was asked to work on the law program for government, I found that report. And it's very eye-opening. And there are a lot of people here who know about it and refuse to share that report publicly. I don't know why, but I can only surmise from my understanding of what the agenda is. So let's just put that aside, right? Because there's no reason. Secondly, we don't send children to school so they could become police officers. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, right? Or they could become lawyers. We send them to school to be educated, to function in the world, to first function in the society that they live in, to become functional, contributing members of society, and hopefully they can take up any profession that they so want. So if you're beginning that is the role of education, you are beginning from a premise of what's the best for the child in the learning experience. That's how you start if you're truly talking about empowering people through education. So what is best for the St. Martin child in the St. Martin space, being educated to function in the St. Martin society? That's the purpose of education. Now let's talk about language of instruction and language instruction. Language of instruction says, the language I am going to educate you in all your other subjects. That's language of instruction. So I'm going to instruct you in the education process using this particular vehicle. Language education, language instruction, language learning means we're learning a foreign language, a new language, 100 languages. There are two different approaches to two different things. With language education, you're saying if we want children to be fluent in the language, they don't have enough Dutch, etc., then you teach the language as early as possible. Right? So if your objective is for all of St. Martin's children to be bilingual, fluently, because remember, they're already speaking English. You don't want to negate English, because we'll get back to that conversation about language of instruction. Language of instruction in St. Martin is the people's language, is English. So we're going to come back to that. But if you want the St. Martin child to be very fluent in any language, Linguistic rules say teach it as early as possible. What do we do with language learning in St. Martin? We teach it in secondary school rather than elementary school. Think of your Spanish and French that you had, right? Now, where does Dutch fit in that conversation? Is it a foreign language, or is it your own home language, what they call mother tongue, whatever? I call it heritage language, right? So are you going to use a child's heritage language or the foreign language to instruct other subjects and other knowledge? Nobody tells you, in no linguistic training, use the foreign language to instruct. If you want the child to be fluent in the foreign language, you teach it as early as possible, and you teach it using the right approaches. In this case, for the St. Martin child, the average, I'm not saying every single St. Martin child, because you have Chinese, you have Hindu, you have different households, the Haitians and the Dominicanos, you have different households with different heritage language. But the St. Martin child in the St. Martin space, Dutch is a foreign language, unless it is his heritage language. And who's that child? The child of Dutch Europeans, maybe the Suriname children, right? Because in their household, they will be using the Dutch language. That's their heritage language. When you use the foreign language in the education process to instruct other subjects, you are taking away the advantage of your children and giving the upper hand to children whose first language is. That's number one. But this is not about who gets the upper hand or not, because you want all children to be fluent in the two languages. So I would say Dutch as a foreign language to the St. Martin kids whose first language is not Dutch. But if you have children whose first language is Dutch, they learn it differently at school. You give a different approach, different subjects, different assignments, right? You see that in Puerto Rico with English and Spanish. Now let's get back to the majority of the St. Martin children on both sides of the island.
Yeah, both sides indeed.
Okay? Their language is English. So when a child comes to you at the age of 5, 6, he has all the capacity he will ever need in terms of linguistic ability to learn. Why are you now teaching him the foreign language? You're sending him backwards. You're hampering him from moving forward, because now he must learn the foreign language first or simultaneously as he's trying to get knowledge. So how are you helping the St. Martin child in the education process with the foreign language of instruction? If you start with English for all St. Martin children, including the children whose heritage is not English, because they live in an English-speaking society that will now compensate. The television is in English. The media is in English. Everywhere they go, the TikTok videos that they're using is in English. They are now complemented. Even if, let's say, they're Chinese-speaking heritage language, the language of the society will complement their experience. And we know in language learning, if you do it before the age of 12, the child should have no problem being fully bilingual in the English language and whatever the heritage language is. But for the St. Martin child, who you think should know this Dutch, start to teach it from he enters this classroom space, but as a foreign language. By the age of 12, I'm guaranteeing you that child will be fluent. I'm telling you, you have been doing it wrong 100 years. Try it my way and see if the results will get better. Because what we've been doing hasn't yielded the results that we keep talking about. If it was working, why isn't it working?
Yeah, because, I look at several of my peers, particularly who went to like schools like MPC and so forth, who had a lot of difficulty.
I'm a product of MPC.
And even set back in so many ways, because it seems like there's this intentional cap set on our youth in our society. That is like, these like certain positions they're only prized if you have that command of the Dutch language.
But you see what we talk about prestige just now?
Correct. Because in addition to that, we're saying, well, in our constitution, our official language is English and Dutch, but there's no accommodation, it seems like, for the English. And I mentioned justice, because justice in particular, when you look at the courts, and even, for example, like I mentioned, like the police in the beginning, because you have a situation where, let's say, someone, like, for example, officers have to write their report in Dutch. So
why?
Let's say you take a
statement. Why would an officer have to write a report?
Let's say you take a statement from someone who may be a foreign national, you may definitely take something out of context. The translation is not so great. So then, and let's say they even sign and agree to what you wrote in Dutch, which is not your mother tongue, your national language. How credible really is what is written on paper?
I want to give you a good example. I was interviewed by the RST team once, and sat in the chair, and the person who was doing the interview was a Dutch European woman. And the gentleman asked, what language are we doing the interview in? I said, what kind of crazy question is that? Right? So when I said that, because of course, they know me, I guess they knew something. But they switched chairs, which I thought was very interesting, because the person who was going to interview me apparently was the Dutch European woman. When she realized that, no, I'm doing this in English, they switched chairs. So now,
but how could you do an interview in Dutch?
No, not that I can't, right?
No, I know that,
but you understand that.
Yeah.
Because here's, again, this is about power and prestige. This is why I'm telling you, St. Martin people have to fight for their language to be in these spaces. So when she writes, so now she's doing the computer recording of what I'm saying. The guy is conducting the interview because she couldn't do it in English. So most of the times our people are forced to be interviewed in a language that the person who's interviewing them too is not even versed in it. She couldn't interview me in English.
And let me add something to that, because I remember sitting in a court case.
Yeah.
Basically, there was this a court case of national interest. I'll put it like that. And the entire proceeding was in Dutch.
Yeah.
And I sat there and I was like, this don't make no sense.
I know.
And also because from what I understood after speaking to some of the people, some persons from the court, it's like, well, even some of the lawyers would say, well, they feel like their arguments are more respected if it's in Dutch. But another issue is that you get to understand that the judge in particular, he in particular prefers to do his cases in Dutch because he's not so comfortable.
But here's the good. The accused,
English.
Who's the person that's on trial and whose life is at stake? The accused. He has to be discomforted so that the lawyer and the judge could be comfortable. You see how justice works there? I've been to a number of cases and I listen to the translations and I'm sitting down going, no, that's not what was said. I'm in the Tribune, I can't say it, but I know that's not what was said. But the accused doesn't know that. So again, why are we not doing this thing in English? Now, we could talk about relationship in the kingdom. That's a whole nother conversation I disagree with because, again, there are no practical or legal reasons for it. But going back to that conversation just now, I was telling you that example where the European Dutch woman switched. When they gave me the statement to read, now they've written the process verbal in Dutch. And I go like, no, I didn't say that. And no, when I said that, I put, no, that was in this context. So I can imagine the person who cannot understand.
Yeah.
Right? I could read and command the Dutch language as good as anybody, as well as anybody else. But I also knew that conversation that I saw on paper was not a conversation you and I just had.
So imagine imagine then a foreign. Not even it doesn't even have to be a foreign national, but imagine your average person who doesn't know Dutch.
Now let's get back to...
And then again, the officers who doing the best that they can, writing a report in Dutch.
Now let's get back to the conversation about power. Why do we have a judiciary in the Dutch language? It's about power. It's like saying the chicken is a chicken because it's a chicken. Oh, the reason we got to learn Dutch is because the law's in Dutch. Okay, who says who? And why are they not in English? And I guarantee you, if the laws are in English, you'll see the different quality of judges, lawyers that you get on this island. Yeah, because what you have now, you're giving the upper hand to a certain select group of people. Usually they're not the best where they are. They come here because they can't get a job elsewhere usually, right? I'm not saying that all of them, but the majority of them didn't do too well over there.
We've seen that in some cases.
Okay.
In the medical field.
In every case, right? Because when things are great, you don't leave great, right? You come because you can't get a job most of the times. And so we have to settle for that. That's number one. But number two, you have the child that's just as brilliant, that just finished the Martin Academy, that could be a great lawyer. But you don't give him that opportunity because you choose to use the foreign language to judge your people in. That's a choice. That's a parliamentarian's decision. That's not anybody else's decision. That's a choice. Because I've gone to court cases in court.
Parliament proceedings.
I've gone to parliament proceedings are in English.
They have to handle laws.
But listen to this conversation, right? And this is why I'm telling you about power and prestige. When, let's say the courthouse tomorrow is going to conduct a sale. They want to sell off all of their furniture. They're going to get new furniture and they're going to sell off everything. What would they place their ads in?
English.
Right. To get you to spend money, everything will be in English. But if they have a job opening,
Netherlands.
Because they want to limit who gets in, right? It's about power and prestige. You see the language as prestigious. So first you have to believe it is. It's a psychological thing. So you accept it. There's no legal basis for why our laws have to be in Dutch. We have no legal basis for it.
And there's even excuse that, well, to translate it costs money. And
but
all
why
that.
translate when you could write them in English in the first place? Here's the stupidest part. Yeah, the ones that are there, yeah, you may have to translate. But you're making new laws moving forward. Why not write them in Dutch, in English, and have them? Let me tell you what happened. This is a true story from 2010 or 11 while I was a minister. A law goes up to the governor's cabinet. The person in the governor's cabinet has a hard time with it because it's in English. So we are told as ministers, you have to write your laws in Dutch because dude over there can't handle English. True story. So you write a beautiful piece of legislation in the English language, your language, and the language in which Parliament conducts its business, the people's business, and then it goes to the school principal's office, and it has to come back and say, no, you send this thing up in Dutch because over here we can't. That's exactly what's happening. That's the reason.
So and
there's no legal
that
basis
ties
for
into
it.
The France from the schizophrenia.
Schizophrenia, huh?
Because you're forced to become more than one person, and of course you're not saying not to know any other language. It is it's
you
not wrong.
want them to know more languages.
Exactly, whether it's Spanish, French, Dutch, whatever other Creole. Papiamento, etc. We have that diversity. A lot of people on this island speak
de facto,
at least 2 to 3
multilingual, all of
languages.
Us, de facto. Why are we using that in the classroom space, in the education space, to empower
our people? Is as far, it really boils down to the distancing, of
it's
the institutions from the people.
Who has the power? And what do you consider prestigious? So in St. Martin, there's a false notion that to speak Dutch makes you something special.
Yeah, or an aristocrat.
Oh, yeah, something special because I can speak Dutch. So what?
Because you can't speak in that many places either.
And where else can you use it? It's like the gilder that we hold on to. Can't use it nowhere else. But we hold on to it because of some attachment. The attachment psychological is nothing practical. There's no legal basis for it. If you were to do something revolutionary to say, listen, this is it. We gone. And if you look at how the parliamentarians treat it, everyone tries to put a blame on somebody else. You see, nobody is brave enough to bell the cat. They know the cat being belled is their survival, to be able to hear when the cat is coming. And everybody knows that what has to happen. But nobody wants to be the one to get up and say, because they're afraid of the backlash. Well, how long can you run around with the chicken without a head, afraid of backlash? Or when are you going to do right by the people of St. Martin? Yeah,
so even as you say that, I guess, time, the time has been creeping. Yeah, but I would definitely like to at least, maybe we'll end off on the discussion of decolonization. Because when that, that became a buzzword, let's say, it took a negative turn, and probably due to the understanding of it, the timing and so forth. But you asked the question I'm going to ask you, like, what is decolonization?
Okay.
And what does that mean to St. Martin?
Okay, let me tell you how I understand it, because apparently a lot of us don't have the same understanding. Colonization, right? I'm a linguist, so we look at words and their meanings, And when we say meaning, we go by dictionary meaning, societal meaning, world usage. Because sometimes a word has a different meaning in a different context, right?
So you refer to etymology as well?
Well, we look at etymology, but we also look at social use, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
But the word de means away from, a part of, no longer, right? The particle de. Colonization means a control by remote. You can mix it up, turn it around how you want, but it's when a group goes into a space, occupies it, and controls it, right? We are still a colony in St. Martin. I don't care the fancy words you use, etc. The process has not ended, right? So when I hear people say decolonization, it means we are trying to end the process of colonization. And for me, that means being independent politically. You cannot be decolonized in the colonial setting.
Well, there's a confusion that's confirmed.
No, I'm not saying there's a confusion. I'm saying people choose to make the word mean what they want. I see confusion
in what you're saying,
yes.
But I mean, in the public sphere, there is a confusion because you're hearing contrary.
We just talked about an anthem. We just talked about the St. Martin language. There's a confusion on everything.
Yeah.
And some people take advantage of that confusion. I'm saying if we understand that we are still a colony, if we accept, this is where the schizophrenia comes in. I don't mind if the Netherlands saying, well, you're no longer a colony because I said so, right? I can live with that because, that's how colonization works. But you who are colonized cannot think that you're no longer colonized. You know it. You're feeling it. You're living it every day. Because if you're no longer colonized, that means the Netherlands has nothing to say. Even if they're still occupying, like in some places in the diaspora, they're no longer in control. That's when colonization ends. But it doesn't mean that you are decolonized even after you have no longer been colonized, right? Because when you look at colonial or ex-colonial spaces, you're still using the language of the colonizer, you're still using the culture, etc. So those of us in academia who speak of decolonization, we talk about decolonization. I teach a class at the University of the Bahamas that's called Decolonization of Literature, right? Caribbean literature. So here's the colonial trope, and this is what we do in this space. And what do we do to take away that or to make this equal to? That's what decolonization means. And I think it is sad because I don't mind the politicians doing what politicians need to do with it, but I think media personnel have a different responsibility. They're the ones that I believe, this is why I say we don't have a professional media here. They're the ones that are supposed to, how I teach my students, discern the facts from the opinions. That's the job of the journalist, the media house. These are the facts. Yes, you could be leaning a little to the left and a little to the right, but your readership needs to know.
Your biases cannot be placed within what you report.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. See, I should look who I'm talking to, right? Your biases should not be there when you are reporting. Even if you have a certain leaning, your readership should be aware. We tend to lean here. We in St. Martin, our media houses tend to say they're media houses. And what they do, oh Lord, what they do with journalism and media, it's horrible. So the media is part of that confusion too. So if the masses are going to understand it, they cannot rely on the politicians and they cannot rely on the media houses. Who do they rely on? Maybe they need to do a TikTok video because the meaning of the word has to be based on either what's in a dictionary, how it is used in the political realm, etc. It cannot be what you make up today.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I understand the people who are fighting for decolonization. What they are saying, when the Netherlands said to the world at the UN, we have decolonized, we have finished the colonial process. What this group of people are saying, no, Netherlands, you did not. Because look, XYZ you have not completed. And I tend to agree with them because for the Netherlands to announce that we have finished the process, okay, what does that mean? You still got a governor? How did you finish that process? Well, we kept the governor because whatever. Okay, what else do we have on this list that we think, this is the group who's arguing this position, then on this list, we have a couple of things that you did not comply with, and we would like for you to finish this process that you claim that you have finished. That's the argument I hear from the group of people who are talking about decolonization. But for me, I think it's an oxymoron because you cannot be decolonized in a colony.
Yeah.
Simple, eh?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I wish we had more time because another thing I wanted to talk about was just the education system in the whole. But
yeah, can we do a program on that? That's what I want to talk
that'll be
about.
part of it.
Yeah.
I'll definitely have you back again. But thank you so much, Dr. Arrindell. I really appreciate taking the time to come out here and clarify certain stuff because there is a lot that you have contributed to St. Martin. And again, I really recommend people to get your book. It is very insightful, and it's a good resource that a lot of future academics, even students right now, and people in general can build off of, that can be used for the usual discussions that we tend to have, whether it's on air, off record, etc. So,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much again.
Thanks for this opportunity.
Great. And so to our viewers and listeners, I also hope that, you guys had some key takeaways from this conversation, and do take care, and until next time.